Hello, and welcome to this episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. If you're loving this metaphysical content, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and press the bell so you get notifications when Kris releases cool new metaphysical content. And also, feel free, put comments down below. This will help perhaps drive the discussion, and we look forward to hearing from you. Let's go ahead and begin.
Indeed, we trust that you are comfortable,
Oh, thank you, Kris. Very comfortable.
and we thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thanks as well for yours.
As well as thank you for allowing this and participating. So please feel free to begin, perhaps with an idea of what we are doing.
Well, I think just going to be speaking about some, I think, general topics that folks might be interested in, and I think one of the things that came up last time you and I talked was perhaps something around non-judgment. And also, there's some interesting things people in our group and stuff that was coming up on the Facebook with a discussion also around forgiveness. And so I was curious about with some of the connections there between those two concepts.
So the topic itself might indeed be quite encompassing, but perhaps a smaller introduction into the idea might be more apropos. So, for example, most people who are raised in one of the three Abrahamic religions, as well as most others, non Abrahamic as well, are raised with the idea that somehow or other the individual has committed some form of transgression or sin or offense. And in the Abrahamic religions themselves, the very idea that you have taken birth is often considered tainted, sinful. So, therefore, you must make amends to the supernatural beings that are able to or not give you some kind of forgiveness. And the concept carries over into human interactions as well. Now, there is one thing, indeed, that if you have an interaction, an exchange with an individual, and you have somehow or other offended or hurt their feelings, there is a precedent for apologizing and to set amends. But the other side of that coin is that somehow or other you have to set amends to the God or the gods, which is another concept entirely and can be quite confusing or demeaning to the individual because it is men who make the rules as to what is and is not offensive to the gods. And sometimes those rules are more or less created on the fly. That presents another kind of situation where one must obviously always be on their guard, lest they make some unknown offenses. And in those situations, one must seek the forgiveness, either by offering prayers or some kind of sacrifice. And that in itself does not necessarily allow for the supposed concept of an all-loving supernatural being who is compassionate and unconditional in their offering of love. So it creates a certain kind of dichotomy, a kind of schism within the personality that, on the one hand, they are encouraged to embrace an all loving, compassionate super being, but at the other side, you have these situations where the person may have unknowingly committed a host of offenses and must seek some kind of retribution for them, some kind of forgiveness. Otherwise, there is divine retribution. Does that make some sense to you?
Yeah, and what I was hearing as well was those concepts might set up opposing belief patterns.
They indeed do. And when there are opposing, contradictory beliefs held by any individual, then it creates further confusion. Because utilizing the earlier example, you are the child of an all loving, compassionate super being. Unless that super being has decided that you have made some kind of offense, and the list is very long. It is probably much longer than a CVS receipt. CVS is a pharmacy chain in the United States.
Yes,
And
I've
of
gotten a
course,
few of those receipts, Chris, so I know what you
indeed,
mean.
they can be quite lengthy. So, all in all, the concept of forgiveness stems from the idea that somewhere, at some time, at some point in your life, you have done something that you may regret. And the point is, if you are supposed to create your own reality, but a super being can supersede that, then you do not create your own reality. And it's a simple equation: either you do or you don't. If you do, then you must be the one to give yourself all the compassion, all the love that you can, as well as share that equally with all of your brothers and sisters. If you don't create your own reality, then you must, by default, follow the guidelines and the dictates of others. So you do not only create your own reality, you do not have your own life, because somebody else must always control it. And this, you will find, resonates with almost all supposed sacred teachings that are related to religious indoctrinations and institutions, including the three Abrahamic religions. Does that make some sense to you as well?
It does, Chris. And the one thing coming up for me is maybe there's some viewers, struggling with understanding how we create our reality, or even, what does that mean, or perhaps even some steps to begin to understand how to get deeper into that concept. Could you help with that?
Indeed. Again, a very involved topic, but let us attempt to make a simpler presentation. The notion is that your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, your emotions all relate to the kinds of beliefs that you entertain. And from that, the energy of your own being, generated through your feelings and emotions, manufacture the experience you call reality. Thus, it warrants an examination of what kind of ideas that one has accepted the lifelong in order to understand where the challenges, where their struggles are stemming from, as well as a further comprehension that all of these struggles and challenges are not the result of outside or external agencies or other people or other situations or other beings, supernatural or not, but instead they stem from the ideas or thoughts that you give credence to, that you accept as fact. So, for instance, if an individual is told sufficiently from a young age that they will never amount to anything, they are feeble, weak, they do not have a good intelligence, such an individual may begin to believe just that very thing or those very things and wonder why their lives are always filled with struggles. And as such, they will experience what they believe about themselves in three-dimensional form. Does that make some sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, having said that, one may think, oh, certainly I am doomed now. What can I do? And the process is relatively simple. By examining what your ideas about life, about yourself, about others, about your government, about your religions, what your ideas about all these things are. And if your recognition is that these ideas demean you and do not encourage the celebration of your life, of your existence, then it might be time for an overhaul, an inventory to get rid of those thoughts and ideas that no longer serve you, that become an impediment, even though at some point in your life they might have proven useful. And by getting rid of, we should emphasize that moving away from those ideas and creating another set of ideas that supports the celebration of your life, the celebration of your being, can begin to show results rather quickly, in as much as you are willing to let go of the old ideas. The more you hold on to the old ideas, what you might call the past, the more difficult it will be to actually get where you want to be in life. Does that make some sense to you?
Yes, and I was wondering, using awareness or mindfulness, when somebody's starting to begin to notice this idea of creating their reality, what are some things that they might be able to notice coming up in their reality that can begin to uh, help with that?
Indeed. A very good place to start is becoming aware or mindful of your particular feelings. And that may tell you that the feelings themselves are an indication of what you believe. So, for instance, and we are fishing in Joseph's memory from a scene of a Homer Simpson episode where he is trying to build a barbecue in his backyard. And the barbecue looks like a Frankenstein. It is left, right, center, upside down, and on and on. And Homer Simpson, in his frustration, trashes the whole thing. Says, why is life so difficult? And we are certain that many, many individuals can relate to that particular idea. Why is life so difficult? And it may feel very frustrating to go through life, filled with difficulties and challenges. And the feeling about that itself will directly lead you to the beliefs, which may very well be exactly aligned with the feeling themselves. So you already are convinced that life is difficult, and your feelings and the resultant actions will demonstrate to you that you believe this. So you can begin by a very simple process, and you can use your fingertips. 5 words. I I am now in control. I am now in control. I am now in control. And I choose to no longer believe that life is a difficult process. I am now in control. Life is a enjoyable journey. No more difficulties for me. And set your mind with it. I am now in control. So it is a very, very simple little process, but it can quickly snap the mind out of that modality and into the one where you want, which is I am now in control. And you can utilize this for varieties of situations with relevant feelings leading to specific belief structures. Because you, of course, hold more than one belief. You may hold hosts of beliefs, legions of beliefs in a way. That does not mean you have to go through each and every one of them, but recognize when a particular feeling comes up out of a situation, then the feeling is trying to let you understand you have this particular belief about the situation. I am now in control. And release your attachment to that old idea that, for instance, life is a constant challenge and frustration, and shift over to an idea that you invest in, which would suggest very strongly that you are in control of your life. Life is not a series of difficulties and challenges and uphill battles, but instead a very enjoyable journey full of experience. Does that make some sense to you?
Yeah, and recognizing those enjoyable moments will help lead to that awareness of who's creating it. Is that correct?
That is correct. Begin to look for the evidence. You already look for evidence that life is going to be frustrating and try to trip you up at every step. So now start looking for evidence to the contrary, evidence that matches the new idea that you are investing in, and it will come, it will show up. But if you constantly look for evidence about the old situation, then you will still have too many struggles. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The very idea that somehow or other life and the universe is antagonistic, is perhaps even meant to get you, to trip you up, is a very acceptable idea in modern vernacular. You are always on the lookout for something that will go wrong. It is referred to as always waiting for the other shoe to drop. What if life not only had no other shoe, what if life had no shoes? What if life was a beautiful field of experiences meant to bring the best out of you, not the worst? What if life and the universe is meant to support and nurture you? Very few people actually pause and think about that, thinking instead that the universe is the opposite. Do you follow?
Yeah, and with my experience with this, it's not about pretending we don't have any problems. But what I've noticed over time is doing that exercise in focus that you're talking about, of focusing on the joy, is that even when there's challenges, we're able to see that overall it is a joyful experience, and even the process of moving through those challenges is part of that, and maybe developing a trust that it's not something that will last forever either.
Indeed. And of course, we're not the first to mention this, but it is worth mentioning that you cannot fix a problem by being in the problem. You have to get out. You have to literally exit that frame of mind that is the challenge. And in this way, you are better equipped to come up with a solution. And this has been demonstrated by individuals the world over. If you still stay in your problem and if you still worry about all the worst possible outcomes, you are not making any room for the solutions to show up. Your mind is cluttered with all of the challenge, all the worries, and therefore you are missing out on some of your best potential. The human being is designed, and we need to be careful. We do not mean to say that someone else designed you, some supernatural being. The neurology of the human being is such that you have access to a large, much larger field of awareness than you give yourselves credit for. You have abilities and talents you hardly ever bank on. You instead think it is noble in some ways, even, to worry about things you have no control over. But what you can control is the manner in which you respond to a situation, meaning your frame of mind. And if you are caught in a frame of mind that keeps, like a hamster wheel, going over and over the worries constantly, you will not be able to simply exit that situation. Does that make some sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
The human mind has incredible potential that is sometimes, rarely ever, tapped into. The human mind, what you call your subconscious, is aware of every breath you have taken since your first. It is aware of every thought you have entertained since your first. It is aware of every step you have taken. It is aware of every meal that you have ever had. That is just a small portion of its potential. Imagine tapping into some other portions of your own being that also have access to various solutions to the various challenges that you have before you. And you rarely ever create challenges you cannot understand and bring a solution to.
Hmm. Well, that's an appetizing concept there, and I think we're getting close to maybe a breaking point. So, any final thoughts on that, Kris?
Even the consideration, the humble consideration that you have the means to bring about solutions to your challenges is enough to prime the pump. Because if you can tease your mind with the idea that somewhere there is the solution within you, and it is not buried fathoms deep in your mind, it can be brought up to your awareness, then immediately your mind can begin the process of getting that solution. It is one thing to do that. It is another thing if you never listen, if you are too busy worrying. you cannot listen to the solutions. Sometimes some of those solutions will show up in your dreams. You might even wake up one morning not remembering dreams, but there is a solution to your situation. So please take your break.
All right. Thank you, Kris.